Most are starting to wrap up taking communion. Kids, in case you didn't see the slide, there it is right there. Kids can head to kids ministry. I think most of them have already seen it and gone, and students to student ministry. It's very hard to contain a rumor in the church. So there's a rumor that Not So Scary is canceled tonight, and it's true. We had to make the decision this morning about that. And our rule of thumb is this. It's been this in the whole time we've done this, 20 years. We've never had to cancel in 20 years. But our rule of thumb has always been, unless it's raining during the event, we're going to have it. But if it's raining between 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., then we just can't have it. But we'll make that call at like 2. We'll make that call just last minute. We'll just see what's happening, because you never know in Tennessee when they predict what's going to happen. But what's happened now is the event has gotten too big and too involved to wait and make a last-minute decision. Because when I gathered with the staff this morning at 9 o'clock and we were talking through it, like, there's already a lot of stuff that's got to be in the works and it's got to be working on right now. And so we were like, there was too much. Like, we were worried about parking people in the field and pulling cars out if it got real muddy. And we were, so it was just, we had to look at the hourly forecast based on the information we had at the time, and it was showing 85 to 90% during that afternoon. Doesn't look like it right now at all, because I've coached softball long enough to tell you what's going to happen. If you cancel because of the forecast, it will not rain. But if you don't cancel because of the forecast, it will pour. And so that's what we're anticipating happening tonight, is it's probably not going to rain. But we had to make the decision based on the information we had at 9 o'clock. And it's simply gotten too big to move inside. And it's simply gotten too involved to move to another night. And they're calling for rain Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week too. So it was like, we just said, we'll have to cancel. That's all we can do. And so we were able to stop the pizzas. We had 250 pizzas ordered. Thankfully, they were not baked, because what would we have done with 250 pizzas? And we were able to stop the food trucks, and we were able to stop the inflatables and all that kind of stuff. We still got a lot of candy. So here's what we're asking you to do. Take back that candy you donated. Like, in all seriousness, we've got it all in Tammy's office. And what she's done is she's got little bags of candy for the kids, so she'll break their heart. I just get to break your hearts. She'll break their hearts, but we're going to give them little bags of candy, so they got a little something to take with them today. But we seriously would love for you to take the candy and use it in your neighborhood and use it with your families and stuff. So we got like piles of candy in her office. If you want to go grab a couple bags and take them home, Ricky, take a bunch of bags for the house. Like, it's great. We'd love for that to happen. Whatever's left over, we're going to donate either to like Haunting in the District or a food pantry or Boys and Girls Club or something. So it's going to go to a good cause. So we'll find a place to do it. And I know some of you, like, showing me pictures like, we've already decorated our car. I was like, oh goodness, pack it up and save it for next year. That's the best we can do. But I really, really, really hate it. But that's what we got to do this morning. So help us spread the word, too, because we got a bunch of people in the community. If it's raining, we're good, because they'll go, oh, we know they're not having it. But if it ends up not raining, then we're going to have people from the community showing up going, where's this thing at? But we just had to make the decision we had to make. So, and everybody was broken heart over it. Let's talk about something positive. Let's talk about Hebrews. We are in Hebrews chapter 11 today. There's 3 chapters left in this book. But I got 4 weeks left in this series. And that's because we're going to take 2 weeks on chapter 11, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But if you've been following along with us in this series, the writer of Hebrews has spent 10 chapters building his case for why Jesus is greater and the new covenant is better. So Jesus is greater than the angels, he's greater than Moses, he's greater than Melchizedek, he's greater than Abraham, he's greater than the high priest, and the new covenant is better than the old covenant because it's based on better promises and it has better practices. And it has a better approach to God. We can draw near to God because we have the new covenant, because Jesus has established a way for us to draw near to God with confidence. And so chapter 10 is an invitation. Chapter 9 is like building his case, preparing for the party. Chapter 10 is the invitation. So chapter 10, he says, let us draw near to God with the full assurance that faith brings. And let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we professed. For he who promised is faithful. And don't give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but continue to encourage one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Spur one another on to love and good deeds. So all of this stuff, this is bold invitation in chapter 10. And what I didn't get to last week in chapter 10, it ends this way with these 6 verses right here. It says, remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering? Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. I don't know what he's talking about here. All right, but obviously something happened. Like he's referencing his audience that he's writing to, and he's saying, you remember how tough it was, like right after you became a Christian. Do you remember how you were persecuted during that time? Do you remember how you were attacked during that time? And honestly, that sometimes happens, right? Sometimes the moment that Satan attacks us is right when we come out of the water, or right when we make a decision for God, or right when we decide, to get sober, right when we graduate. That's the moment that Satan comes after us, because that's a time that we're vulnerable. And this happened to the Hebrews that he's writing to. Like at some point, they were challenged. Their faith was challenged, and they went through some type of suffering or hardship. And he says to them in verse 34, you suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourself had better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. So I don't know what's going on, but I know that it was a very difficult situation for them. And sounds like they were treated unfairly. Sounds like they suffered persecution. Sounds like that they were suffering some things there. And he's saying, remember how you endured and you got through that? Keep enduring. Like, keep enduring this way. You remember how tough it was to get through that? You made it. Keep enduring. And he says, don't throw away your confidence. I find that an interesting turn of phrase there. Don't throw away your confidence. You will be richly rewarded. Now, if you're reading this story for the first time, you're reading this letter for the first time, one of the questions that might pop into your head at this point is, how do you do that? Like, that's easy to say. If somebody's going through a hard time, it's easy to say, hey, just don't give up. Just keep going. Don't give up. But in the moment, how do you not give up? Especially when you're being pressed, or you're suffering through difficult times. How do you not give up? Like, what is it? How do you continue to walk the life of faith? How do you continue to be faithful to God? How do you continue walking this journey of faith? And that's what chapter 11 for, in my opinion. So chapter 10 is an invitation. Hey, because Jesus is greater and the new covenant is better, I want to invite you to draw near to God. And then the question would have been, yeah, but how do I draw near to God? And how do I hold unswervingly to the hope that I profess? How do I do that? In chapter 11, he says, let me tell you how to do it. And I'm going to tell you how to do it by showing you examples of people who've been there and done it before you. Now, you guys know that my family likes to hike. Well, I'm going to back that up a little bit. It's not necessarily that we like to hike. We like to see beautiful things. And sometimes if you're going to see beautiful things, you got to hike to get there, right? I mean, you got to put in some effort to get there if you're going to see beautiful things. So we love, right now, the last 5 or 6 years, we've loved going to the national parks, and we love seeing beautiful things. And sometimes you got to put in some effort to see something beautiful. And our criteria for hikes are twofold. So number one, it needs to end with a waterfall. Or number two, it needs to end with a mountaintop view. Those are the two criteria. We don't love loops. Well, I'm okay with loops, but my family doesn't love loops that go nowhere. They want to, there's got to be something. There's got to be a destination we go to. So if there's a waterfall at the end and it's less than 4 miles, yeah, we're up. Let's go. We'll hike it. Or if there's a mountaintop view, and even though it's steep, we'll still go because, there's going to be a pretty view at the end. Well, about 5 years ago, my son, when he was young, added a third criteria to that. And it was food trucks. So he got some idea, if it ends with a waterfall, let's go. If it ends with a mountaintop view, let's go. And when he was 8 or 9 years old, he was like, if it ends with a food truck, I'm in. I'll hike if it ends with a food truck. And I've got this video I'm going to show you. They're very little short videos. You may have seen them if you follow our YouTube channel because I posted them several years ago. This is when he was little, and we were at Timms Ford State Park during COVID, and we were hiking, and he had my phone, and he was doing a video blog. And he was talking about, and of course, you know, he's young, so he's kind of, the hike's getting hard, and he's motivating himself to keep hiking. And so, watch these.
So we are going down this trail. Hope it leads to food. Hope it leads to a food truck. You can see. I just wanted to lead to a food truck. So we are going.
Okay, so you see my hands. You can see them just briefly going like this. My hands are like briefly like, what are you talking about? I hope it leads to a food truck. Why do you think there's a food truck at the end of this trail? And so I'm going to dash his hopes in the next video.
I just wanted to share something. There's a big hill up here that it probably leads to a food truck. And what?
There's no food trucks on this trail.
Sorry, but I just wanted to share.
I don't know why. I mean, I probably shouldn't have in the moment, but I don't know why he's thinking food truck. But that's his motivation, right? I mean, there's a big hill up there. How am I going to conquer this hill? Well, it probably leads to a food truck. In other words, there's going to be a great reward at the end of this hill. If I just conquer this hill, there's going to be a great reward at the end of this hill. And I don't know where he got that in his brain or why he's thinking that, but this is actually a pretty good strategy. When you are struggling with something, it's a pretty good strategy to kind of look to the future, not the present, like what am I walking toward that might make the walk worth it. That's a pretty good strategy, right? He couldn't see what was in the future, and I'm sure we couldn't find a food truck at Timms Ford State Park, but I'm sure we went to the gift shop and bought something there. But he couldn't see what was in the future, but he thought something good was ahead that was going to make the hill worth it. You know what they call that? They call that faith. Where's my verse here? I had it up already. They call that faith. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith is confidence in what we hope for. He was pretty confident right there. And assurance of what we do not see. That's the definition of faith. It's not blind trust. Faith is not blind trust. It's informed trust. So it's not just like a wishful thinking or a feeling. It's informed. We have confidence to believe that what we're walking toward is there. Now, he really didn't. He was 8 years old at the time. But like when we go hiking, like I showed you this a picture several months ago. But like this was one of the best hikes we did in Acadia. And this was the view from the mountaintop. And you see from where the picture was taken to where that first person is hiking, that's the only part of the trail where you could see that view. The rest of the view was trees and rocks and hills. There's 98% of the trail does not look like that. That was the final 2% that looked like that. And so why would we walk up that trail? Well, because down at the bottom, we couldn't see this from the bottom, but down at the bottom there was a park ranger who said, I've been up there, and let me tell you, it's amazing, and here's what you're going to see, and it's going to be tough to get there, but it's worth it. Just keep hiking. It's going to be worth it when you get there. And then we looked it up on Google, and there's all these people that had gone before us who'd hiked it before us, and now my reviews may be up on Google, that have all done it before us, that were telling people who hadn't done it yet, oh, it's worth it. Just stick with it. It's worth it. You'll love it at the end. That's Hebrews chapter 11. So in Hebrews chapter 11, that's what the author's saying. Let me define faith for you. Faith is confidence in what you cannot see. So it's assurance in what you hope for. So that's faith. But let me tell you, it's worth it. And let me give you some examples of other people who have walked before you. And so he starts listing all of these folks. So if you look through Hebrews chapter 11, there's 5 examples we're going to look at today. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and Sarah. And then the second half of the chapter, it's Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and Rahab. And then he lists a whole bunch of names at the end of the chapter and said, I'm not even talking about Gideon. And then he starts listing all these names like he doesn't even tell their story. But what he's doing is saying, go back to your scriptures. And he's writing to a Hebrew audience that would have had the Hebrew scriptures, which we call the Old Testament. Go back to your scriptures, read those stories, and those are people who walked the trail before you, and you can look to their example as to why you need to make it to the end of the trail. If you just read their stories, you can look to their example. So what we're going to do the next 2 weeks is just tell some stories. Now, I just want to tell you the stories of these people because some of them you've probably heard of and some of them you probably haven't heard of. Like when I read that list of names off, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and Sarah. some of you, if you grew up in church, you may know all of them. You may like, oh yeah, I remember all those names. If you didn't grow up in church, you may like, I don't know any of those people, and I don't know what they mean. So I want to kind of step back, and you're actually in the second group. It actually may be better than the first group because you don't have any preconceived notions of who these people are and what they've done. You just come to it with a fresh set of eyes. So I just want to tell you the story of who these people are and why they could help us in our journey. All right, so we're going to start with, well, I got to read the passage first. Didn't even do that, did I? We're going to start with reading the passage. We're going to start with reading the stories, okay? So this is Hebrews chapter 4. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abraham still speaks even though he's dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith, and this is the whole chapter, he's just going to keep saying, by faith, by faith, by faith. And he keeps listing examples. Abraham, when he was called to go to a place he would later receive as inheritance, he obeyed and went even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky and as countless as the sand of the seashore. And what he's saying by that phrase, he as good as dead, is Abraham was too old to be having kids. And Sarah was too old to be having kids. But from this couple, God fulfilled his promises to them, and the nations, he became the father of many nations. And we'll get to these last few verses, 13 through 16 here. But I want to talk about these that we just read. So let's go back to, verse 4. And let's talk about these read. I just want to break them down. Five of them real quick. So first, we got Abel, all right? And yes, you can tell from looking at that picture, that's AI, right? Can you tell? Yeah, because I was too lazy to look up Google. I'm too lazy to Google. I just put it into chat now. So I was like, draw me a picture of Abel. And it drew me a picture of Abel. So this, you can have, 95% certainty, this is what he looked like. So this is exactly what Abel looked like, and this is exactly what happened. His story is told in Genesis chapter 4. So if you want to go back and read the story of Genesis chapter 4, you can read the story of Abel. Abel was the second-born son of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, of course, the first man and the first woman, they had two sons. Cain was firstborn. Abel was secondborn. Then they had Seth, and then you can read a little later in Genesis, it said they had many sons and daughters. Many, many sons and daughters. But these are the most famous, Cain and Abel. And they brought sacrifices to God, the offering to God. And Cain was a farmer, and he tended crops, and Abel tended livestock. So they're both farmers, I guess you could say, but one tended crops, one tended livestock. Cain's offering was rejected, while Abel's was accepted. Genesis doesn't really tell you why. It just says Abel's offering was considered righteous and Cain's offering was not considered righteous. And we don't really know why. There's two main theories about it. One theory is that Cain's offering was kind of done carelessly and thoughtlessly, like he just kind of brought it, but he wasn't really sacrificing anything. And Abel's offering was this choice, generous offering. So it wasn't the type of offering. It wasn't that God preferred livestock over grain. It was about the heart of the person bringing the offering. It was about the motivation, their intent. And only God knows that. The other theory actually comes from Hebrews, and it's the idea that Abel's offering involved a sacrifice or the shedding of blood, and without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. And so that's from Hebrews. Some people think, well, the reason Abel's was considered more better sacrifice was because it involved a sacrifice. We don't know. All we know is what Hebrews says, that by faith Abel brought a better offering. By faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of him. And by faith he still speaks even though he's dead. And of course, if you know the rest of the story, you know that Cain killed his brother over that story. But that is another story. Let's talk about Enoch. Let me show you what he looks like. There he is. That's Enoch. So his story is told in Genesis chapter 5. And only in maybe 2 sentences. And when I first read this, and I was first studying, I was like, Enoch. And I went back and I read Genesis and I said, oh, Enoch was the son of Cain. So this is about the son of Cain. Different Enoch. That's not who he's talking about in Hebrews chapter 11. He's talking about the Enoch from Genesis chapter 5. And in Genesis chapter 5, all we know about him is he's the father of Methuselah, who was the oldest person who ever lived. And he walked faithfully with God. And because of that, he was no more, and God took him away. So Hebrews told us about that in Hebrews chapter 11. What they're implying is that Enoch didn't die in the traditional sense. He was just taken into heaven. That's what is implied in the book of Genesis, is what implied in the book of Hebrews. And the reason that he did not experience death but went straight into the presence of God is because of his great faithfulness. What was the nature of his great faithfulness? We don't know. The only thing it says is he was commended as one who pleased God. And so the only thing we can do is go, well, like Abel, only God knows the heart. God knows our heart. God knows our motivation, our intent. So God was pleased with Abel. God was pleased with Enoch because he judged their hearts as pleasing to him, which is where we get this great line in verse 6, that without faith it's impossible to please God. So pleasing God, we kind of get that backwards sometimes. We think, well, what pleases God is my perfect obedience pleases God. And one, you'll never have perfect obedience. That doesn't exist. And so you'll always fall short. If that's the standard for pleasing God, you'll always fall short. It's our faith that pleases God. It's when we trust him. That's called trusting in him. So when we trust in God, that is pleasing to him. And it says that Enoch gives us the example that we believe he exists and we believe that he rewards those who seek him. That's what faith motivates us to do. All right, Noah. What do you think Noah looks like? Just like Enoch. Noah looks just like Enoch. I don't know. It's uncanny. I just kept asking AI, like, draw me a picture of this guy, draw me a picture of this guy. And I said, draw me a picture of Noah. He looks just like Enoch, except there's an ark in the background. Look at that. And people think that this technology is going to take over the world. So, not yet. His story is told in Genesis chapter 6 through 9. And he's probably the guy you've heard of because everybody knows Noah and the ark, right? I mean, everybody knows the story. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you've heard of Noah and the ark. Anytime it rains, people will make jokes about, building an ark. Or it's in children's storybooks. Or it's in art. There's movies about Noah and the ark. I'll talk about that here in just a second. There's a replica of the ark in Kentucky. Like somebody built a replica of the ark and you can go visit it in Kentucky. And someday they'll get to meet Noah and be like, oh yeah, we built this thing over in Kentucky. This is my favorite representation of Noah. If you think through all the cultural, this is my favorite depiction of Noah. And y'all remember that. It's an older movie. That's Evan Baxter from Evan Almighty. You know why that's a good depiction of Noah? Because that movie does a good job of showing just how crazy he had to have appeared when he's building an ark and it hadn't even started raining yet. Right? I mean, he just, you had to imagine that people thought Noah was crazy because it's not raining yet. What are you doing preparing for an event that's not even happening yet? And the writer of Hebrews says that's faith. That's what faith does. Faith prepares for something that hadn't happened yet. But it's coming. We're all going to face trials and tribulations. Are we going to just wait until they hit and then figure out what we're going to do? Or are we going to start building our faith now? The story of Job's a good example of that as well. But by faith, Noah was, when warned about things not seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. So think about that. So Noah's example is not only of just believing in something, but Noah's example is taking action on that belief. So Noah believed if God said it's going to rain, it's going to rain. So I better take action on that. And so faith is not just believing. I have faith, so I just believe in something. No, faith means that I'm doing something in response to that belief. If I believe this to be true, then I'm going to do something in response to that belief. We shouldn't just prepare for something. We should be prepared. I mean, that's like it, not just, it may happen, may not. No, be prepared. And faith motivates us to do something, not just believe something. All right, last one. Abraham and Sarah. Now, you've probably noticed. I know, you're a sharp audience. Abraham looks a lot like Noah, who looks a lot like Enoch. That's Enoch. That's Enoch with an ark. That's Enoch facing the other way. All right, and with a wife. Now, at this point, I was getting curious with AI. And at this point, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Why are they all white? Like, they're all old white men. What is this? Why is it? And so I asked AI, like, was Abraham European? And it said, no, but I'm biased when I do artwork because I base it on early Renaissance art, and early Renaissance art was biased, so I bring forward that bias from the Renaissance period into today and depict them as white Europeans. Do you want me to draw them as they really were? And I said, yes. And so that's a more accurate depiction of what they really looked like. So we'll go with that one for here. And that's a whole other sermon in and of itself. Wow, that's a whole other sermon of like how we trust all this technology. But anyway, the story of Abraham and Sarah is told in Genesis chapter 12 through 25. So nearly half the book, or a fourth of the book at least, is the story of Abraham and Sarah. Abraham is the father of the three major religions in the world. So Islam claims Abraham as a father, Judaism claims Abraham as a father, and Christianity claims Abraham as a father. That's because God fulfilled his promise to him that he'd be the father of many nations, that from his offspring would be like the stars of the sky. And both Abraham and Sarah are given examples of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. Sarah is given as an example of faith because she believed God. Let me find the clear here. By faith, Sarah was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Now, what's interesting about that is she didn't believe him at first. She didn't have perfect faith. Sarah didn't, like, God made this promise and Sarah immediately believed. No, God made this promise and Sarah laughed at her like, that ain't going to happen. And they even tried to do it on their own terms rather than God's terms. But Sarah eventually came to believe, just as Abraham eventually came to believe, and she trusted in God. So she's given us this example of faith, that she believed that considered him who had made the promise, which I love this lesson right here because faith deals in improbabilities and often appears when things seem impossible. So don't focus on the unlikeliness of the situation. Focus on the one who's making the promise. That's the story of Sarah. Don't just focus on, well, this will never happen. I can't see this happening. Focus on the one making the promise and believe the one making the promise. Now, Abraham is commended in this part for faith because he was longing for a country that God had promised him. And so you've heard the phrase, the promised land, or Canaan's land. To Canaan's land, I'm on my way. You know, this is, Abraham was longing for this country, this promised land, this Canaan's land, that he never got to possess. It was promised to him, but in his lifetime, he never got to possess. And that's what his faith is commended for. Verse 10, it says, he was looking forward to a city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. And so the promises of God to Abraham were not fulfilled in his lifetime. He never possessed the promised land as his own. He lived in it, but as a stranger, a foreigner. Moses was offered the same promises of God, and he never possessed the land. He saw it from a distance. And there's some sin involved in Moses' story, but he saw it from a distance and he never possessed it. But this is given an example of faith. And if you want to pull this forward in the New Testament, for us, the promised land is heaven. The promised land is a new heavens and a new earth. Like, we live as strangers and foreigners in this land, but we look forward to a city with foundations whose architect and builder is God. We look forward to a future reward a future. It's way better than a food truck. It's way better than a waterfall. It's way better than a mountaintop view. It's way better than anything we're living in now or experiencing now. This is what Abraham was commended for, but then look at how Hebrews ends this particular section right here, verse 13. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. Well, people who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. So Abraham realized, this is not my home. I'm looking for something better. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes, especially in a Western democracy like America, where things are really great. I mean, we really got it pretty good. I know there's problems. I 100% understand that. But, I'm reading about the 1800s right now, and we got it pretty good. We've got a lot of comforts and safeties and securities and freedoms, and we got it pretty good. And we sometimes forget that there's something better out there. And so he says these people are longing. They consider themselves strangers and foreigners. They're longing for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had an opportunity to return. Remember, the Hebrew people were tempted to return to the old covenant practices, the old covenant ways. Like, stop thinking about that stuff. You got something better ahead of you. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And so this is what faith does. Faith, if you want to look at all these examples together, and I got to wrap up here, but faith looks forward into the future. Faith hopes forward into the future. Even though we may not see it in our lifetime, we continue to remain faithful. We may not see it in our timing. We continue to remain faithful. And so it is confidence in what we hope for and assurance in what we do not see. And like Abel, it is expressed through obedience of the heart. Like Enoch, it is expressed through steady, or what I would call long obedience. It's expressed through long obedience. Faith is not like it's not like this emotional high. You're going to have those in your faith, but they don't last. It's long, steady obedience. Faith is expressed through active obedience, like Noah, and it's expressed through just faithful obedience, like Abraham and Sarah. Even when you think, this is crazy. I don't know why we're doing this. This is what's going on. You continue to trust in God, and you continue to long for a country that's not your own, and continue to hope that God will deliver on those promises. So we'll stop there. We're going to pick up in verse 17 next week. I know you're like, I know it's time to stop, so you're not going, keep going. But it's an abrupt ending. I'm not wrapping this sermon up, because part 2 is next week, and we're going to talk more stories of faith. So we'll look at the example of Isaac, and look at the example of Jacob, and I forgot who else was in there. Rahab, that's an interesting one. And so we'll look at all those examples next Sunday. So let me pray for you, and we'll be dismissed in just a minute here. Let's pray. Father, I'm thankful for all the people who have gone before us. So when we read chapter 11, we're reminded of these Old Testament heroes. But we also realize that we're standing on the shoulders of generations of people who have had faith, and people who had the faith to start this particular church, 20-something years ago, or people who had the faith to start the particular denomination that we were born out of, or people who had the faith to, we're getting into October, to nail 95 Theses on the wall or a door of the church and proclaim Reformation. Like, we're standing on the shoulders of generations of people who have had faith. And I pray that we would look to their example. And that we would continue walking, knowing that if they walked and they made it, that we can continue walking. And I pray that we would be an example to the next generation as well. So we've got a generation of kids that are looking for examples of faith and are looking for people who persevere when times get tough. And so help us to be an example to them as well. And, of course, most of all, we thank you for your grace that comes through Jesus. And it's in his name we pray these things. Amen. All righty. Next, we'll read the rest of chapter 11 next week. Don't forget to go get some candy, please. We need the candy to go away. And I know all weekend we've been asking you to pray for no rain. So go ahead and pray for rain. We would like to look wise at 4 p.m. this afternoon. So pray for rain, and we need it anyway. But and we'll see you guys next Sunday.